And what have you learned?
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is a silly time travel movie from the 80s about two valley boys wanting to be rock stars. It's just a goofy comedy, right? It couldn't possibly be beholden to any clever writing, foreshadowing, or thematic importance. Right? Like horror, comedy is very subjective. Not everyone is going to find the same thing funny. In truth, properly setting up a comedy can be just as important as writing gags or one-liners. One could even argue that the jokes would not land as effectively if we didn't understand or sympathize with the characters, thus creating a need to establish their motivations and obstacles. So to kick off 2024, we're going to travel back to 1988 and take a closer look at how the first 10 pages of this iconic film establishes the characters, their goals, the obstacles they have to overcome, and why it's absolutely hysterical that these two valley boys became literal rock gods. It's not an opinion, it's barely an analysis, it's just the first 10 pages. Two wannabe rock stars, Bill S. Preston Esquire and Ted Theodore Logan, are currently failing history class, the result of which means that they won't graduate from high school, and Ted will be sent off to military school by his father, the chief of police. If that happens, the duo won't be able to start their rock band, Wild Stallions. The assignment is simple. Write about how historical figures from history would view the modern world of San Dimas, basically how things have changed and or stayed the same. While attempting to study and write their paper, they're interrupted by Rufus, a fan from the future who gives them a time-traveling phone booth. They inadvertently abduct Napoleon Bonaparte and get the idea to collect other figures from history to help with their report. The pair travel through the circuits of history and pick up Billy the Kid, Socrates, Sigmund Freud, Ludwig von Beethoven, Joan of Arc, Genghis Khan, and Abraham Lincoln. They also make a stop in medieval England and fall in love with two princesses, whom they try to rescue from some royal ugly dudes. They are captured and subsequently rescued, but are unable to take the princesses with them at that time. After a brief stop in the future, where they get a glimpse of a society that seems to worship them, and a pit stop to repair the booth in caveman days, Bill and Ted return to modern-day San Dimas to introduce the historical figures to their world. While they try to collect Napoleon, who was ditched by Ted's younger brother Deacon for being, quote, a dick, the other figures get into all sorts of shenanigans at the mall and are arrested by Ted's dad. They find Napoleon at a water park and go rescue the figures using time travel to do so. Just in time, the pair arrive at school to do the report and put on a rock concert. By having live demonstrations of the figures present and showing they understand history and how it connects to modern day, they get an A+ on their report and can continue working on their band. They finally acknowledge that they need some proper practice, at which point Rufus shows up with the princesses and reveals that Wild Stallions are destined to become so great that universal peace and harmony are achieved because everyone is such a fan of their music. Bill and Ted declare their adventure to have been excellent and start jamming out on instruments. Horribly. But Rufus assures us that
they do get better.
The script starts out not as the movie does, with the jewel descending from a hole in the ceiling. Oh, I guess I don't need this anymore. But on an orange wasteland, accompanied by super titles. San Dimas, California, 2687 AD. As most apocalypse movies start with this kind of image, it is telling us that this opening scene likely takes place in the future. Therefore, we can easily infer that the genre of the film is science fiction. This image is accentuated by the arrival of a solitary figure, dressed in black and walking in silence. He enters a futuristic dome, described as implying grandeur, solemnity, and importance. Then the figure is revealed. Rufus, the personification of everything that is, has been, or will be rock and roll. This image is the first instance of the Rule of Three, showing us that this is also a comedic film. The setup that we're getting is that we're in the future, and it's a wasteland save for a few safe havens. The expectation is that this will be an important and solemn sci-fi film, no doubt exploring the depths of humanity's psyche. Then the payoff subverts that expectation by showing the lonely traveler dressed in rock and roll attire. Apocalypse movies tend to have a distinct dystopian look, and this is not that look. Furthermore, since Rufus personifies rock and roll, we can infer that this genre of music will also be important to the narrative of the story. Rock and roll is well known for being anti-authority, which is essential to Bill and Ted's journey. The duo's main goal throughout the film is to get an A+ on their history report, so they can start their rock band. Thus, their teacher, Mr. Ryan, serves as the central obstacle to overcome. Teachers are seen as an authoritative presence to most children and teenagers, and are often one of the first ones that they start fighting against, other than their parents. Which brings me to, Ted's entire motivation throughout the film is that he does not want to be sent to military school by his cop father, and Ted is all about avoiding them. Even during the climax, Ted's final obstacle before the report is having to rescue his friends from the police station. Their journey shows them capture several world leaders, and these characters follow Bill and Ted, thereby granting the duo authority over them and subverting the expectations of these characters. Thus, Rufus being the personification of rock and roll subtly implies what our heroes will believe in before we've even met them. Rufus heads towards the center of the room and meets 3 unnamed characters called the 3 most important people in the world. Again, we are shown another subversion of expectation. If these 3 are so important, why don't they have names? They're also described as looking like ZZ Top, another rock and roll legend, reinforcing the importance of the music genre in our mind. They're slowly tapping their feet to metallic music around them. Since we'll later learn that this is Wild Stallions, it subtly implies Bill and Ted's influence on this futuristic society. One of the leaders says, "It is time." Though he is talking about Rufus needing to go back and stop Bill and Ted from being separated, there is a bit more to this line than that. Page 1 established that this film would be a science fiction movie, and this line clarifies what subgenre that will be: time travel. Time is a recurring motif throughout the film. Ted fails to wind his watch, which results in the characters always being late. Rufus will tell them that the clock in San Dimas is always running, thereby creating a ticking clock to keep the plot moving along and maintain the stakes for our heroes. Time itself presents an obstacle for the duo to overcome,
so don't got time.
And they use a, frankly, frighteningly intellectual understanding of time travel to rescue their friends from the police. It's also worth noting that the time machine itself malfunctions several times. A hole in the ceiling opens and pours light into the dark dome. This probably implies that it is dark times and that there is a light in the darkness. It's interesting that the future people are creating the light, seemingly foreshadowing their intervention in Bill and Ted's darkest chapter. A black obelisk, which is a jewel in the final film.
Oh dang, hang on a second. There we go.
Descends to the floor and transforms into a 1987 phone booth. In addition to being another subversion of expectations, it also cements the fact that this film is about time travel. The first thought that comes to mind when seeing an old phone booth in a science fiction setting is probably Doctor Who, the whole premise of which is traveling through time and space. Going further, the script does specify the year of the phone booth as 1987, most likely because that's the year they're going to travel to, and they want to make it as easy as possible for Bill and Ted to use, as the phone booth would be something they'd be familiar with during their time. Rufus will also refer to the place surrounding them while they're traveling as the circuits of history, which harkens back to an old phone recording.
"I'm sorry, all the circuits are busy right now. Please try again later."
Which was meant to say that there weren't any available lines to connect to, which comes into play later in the movie. Rufus prepares to enter the phone booth, but addresses the leaders with the iconic line, "Be excellent to each other." Their reply, "Party on, dude." This line is repeated 4 times in the script, but the matter-of-fact way in which it is said here evokes feelings of fanaticism. Not only does this foreshadow the reveal of Bill and Ted's importance in this future, since their music created this utopic society, but it's done in a way that ties the rock and roll motif into the scene. We've all sung along to our favorite songs, and we especially do this at concerts. It's a way of showing the band how much we love them. Since we later learn that Bill and Ted came up with this t-shirt slogan, which we find out Ted is designing on page 5, this line tells us that this society is a fan of their band, even if we don't know it at the time. Rufus enters the booth, and we get a wonderful sequence showing the intricacies of operating it. The booth disappears, and we're left with the leaders paying reverence to a pair of towering portraits. Because these 3 are supposed to be the 3 most important people in the world, them worshipping these portraits show how important the men in those pictures are. The script then says that the leaders are concerned. If you've ever followed, well, any time travel movie, in order to keep the plot moving and provide stakes for the story, there has to be a key historical event and forces that are acting against our protagonist to prevent this event from occurring. The leaders are worried that something or someone will affect a crucial point in their history. This one line sets up the physical stakes of Bill and Ted's adventure through time. We begin with another subversive joke that establishes the tone for the rest of the film. After the first 3 pages where we've seen the solemnity of the future, we get to hear voices in darkness. There are many movies that begin with dialogue over a black screen, which is meant to emphasize the importance of the movie. So when we hear the voices of our 2 teenage protagonists, we're meant to think they're going to say something important. Instead, we get air guitar. The reverence with which the leaders treat the portraits leads us to believe that their idols are great men, intelligent, powerful, or charismatic. The next few pages will show us that these 2 teens are the farthest one could possibly be from any of these traits. which adds another layer to the subversion, making the joke all the more hilarious. When we finally get to see our two heroes, they're waiting at a bus stop. This seems like a good time to talk about the difference between the script and the final movie. It is inevitable that there will always be changes from page to screen, either in the form of deleted scenes, changing or omitting dialogue, or altering the location of a particular scene. Both versions of Bill and Ted's introductions work well and accomplish the same goals. They both have the duo introduced at the same time, showing that they're not only bandmates but also friends. They both feature a focus on the camera element and an MTV style of shooting themselves. They both have a focus on playing the part of rock gods, favoring cool tricks or memorable moves rather than being competent players. But there are a few differences that I believe are worth noting. First, they're playing air guitar. The movie firmly establishes that they don't know how to play their guitars, both in dialogue and in action, but the script hasn't told us whether or not they have their own guitars yet, and in fact later will address that they do not. This means that they have even farther to go before they achieve their dreams, and sets up a running character quirk between the pair. Second, they're in public. People are giving them strange looks, and they continue to play. This tells us immediately that Bill and Ted don't really care about how they look or what people think, an admirable and necessary quality when pursuing a dream. Third, in the film, an alarm goes off telling them that they're going to be late for school, basically saying that school is an obstacle to them getting what they want. In the script, they're already waiting for the bus to school, implying that school is already in their way and working against them, foreshadowing the main conflict of the story. The bus arrives to pick up our heroes. They head to the back and crash into the seats. Then we get a compelling description of the pair. They are not hard guys. Hard guys refers to men who have physical or mental toughness. Frequently, they're given a gruff or antagonistic personality, which usually strays into bully territory. This description shows that Bill and Ted are none of these things.
Look, we're totally weak. We can't possibly fight.
The script goes even further to say that they're remarkably benign and good-natured. Given their rock and roll aspirations, this creates a heavy contrast between their personalities and their personas. Then we focus on each of them specifically. Bill is deemed the thinker of the two, with thinker in quotation marks clearly meant to imply a substandard intelligence. Contrasting Bill, Ted is called the dreamer, described as being more into the immediate. It's a subtlety that suggests Bill is more of a futurist and Ted is more about the present, which comes into play a couple of times, such as Bill reminding Ted to focus on the project or to wind his watch. Perhaps the biggest instance of this is during the climax, when the duo must rescue their friends from prison. While Ted will initially suggest the idea of using the time machine after the report, Bill is the one who comes up with the more thought-out plans, such as where to leave the keys and setting up the tape recorder. Ted generates the idea, and Bill plans it out. The dreamer and the thinker. Ted then pulls out a mock-up for a t-shirt design that displays the name of their band, Wild Stallions. Another interesting difference between the script and the movie is that Bill will talk about how awesome the band will be in the movie, but talks about the t-shirts in the script. Both instances, he mentions the need for Eddie Van Halen to join their band, another rock legend. This line sets up the key flaw in the pair, suggesting that rather than be great musicians themselves, they intend to ride their coattails instead. Ted then concurs with Bill, saying they need the t-shirts to get Van Halen. I think this proves that there is a spark of intelligence in these two, meaning their quest to pass history will not be in vain. Anyone who's ever tried to be successful knows that it doesn't just happen and it isn't just one massive step. It's a bunch of little steps that take place over a long period of time. You need to complete step A to get to step B, then step B to get to step C, and so on. While the duo is definitely less interested in the work than they are in the payoff, this simple line does indicate that they have some idea of how hard it's going to be for them. It makes them a little more sympathetic as we understand the difficulty of what they're about to go through and can project our own feelings onto them. We want them to succeed because we want success in our own lives. Thus, this simple interaction creates a connection between audience and character. Page 6 continues the conversation from the previous page, with Ted retorting that having instruments is pointless since they don't know how to play guitar anyway. Bill states their inability to play as the reason why they need Van Halen, and Ted brings it back to the t-shirts.
Excellent!
Again, it ties into the staircase of success. They know they have to take little steps, but the joke is that they aren't 100% clear on what those steps are. The bus gets the duo to school, and they approach the popular group. Two girls, Buffy and Jody, rebuff them, and a guy named Randolph calls them miscreants. This is the first instance we've seen of how the modern world sees Bill and Ted, and they are not popular. The opening pages also do an excellent job of creating the illusion that Bill and Ted have no future. These two are super geeks, passionate about their fandom, which just happens to be rock and roll. They're a pair of soft boys trying to start a rock band with only a half-baked plan and 3 brain cells between them, of which Bill has 2. They don't have any instruments, and even if they did, they don't know how to play them. And they're not popular enough to gather a crowd. I only mention this because it's very interesting that these two will be considered gods in the future. This also shows the change that these two will go through. Right now, we're being told that they're lazy and clueless. By the end of the movie, though, they learn that hard work and determination are useful tools that can help them on their road to success. I wonder if having to be around so many inspiring world leaders and being responsible for their well-being had anything to do with that. After Randolph calls the pair of miscreants, Bill and Ted celebrate the nickname. This could either be reinforcing the idea that the duo doesn't care about how they look as they merely brush off the insult, or it could be that they don't understand the meaning of the word miscreant and mistake it for being a compliment. I think it's a little bit of both. The stereotype of rock and roll culture is one of flouting authority and being poorly behaved, which is basically what being a miscreant means. If Bill and Ted do in fact know the meaning of the word, and they want to be rock stars, they'd probably take miscreant as a compliment.
Excellent!
The pair go to their lockers. Ted says no books, just junk food wrappers and heavy metal stickers. This is a good visual that emphasizes Ted's priorities in life, but also continues to foreshadow the coming conflict of school and work versus dreams, which is essential to Ted's arc. Bill's locker has a mirror attached to it, and he studies his most excellent moustache, which is basically just peach fuzz. Ted is more focused on Buffy and Jody, though, just down the hall. Again, this shows Bill as the future and Ted as the present. While Bill only has the beginnings of a mustache, he's clearly planning on growing it out, but Ted just wants to live in the moment. Buffy and Jody are meant to be the perfect girls that the duo aspires to be with. This also establishes Ted as the ladies' man, which Bill will comment on in medieval England.
You're the ladies' man.
It also sets up another goal for the duo, at least as far as the script is concerned, getting dates for the prom.
Will you go to the prom with us in San Dimas?
The rejection they face is just another piece of evidence telling us how unpopular they are, providing further contrast between the present and the future. After being rejected by Buffy, Ted turns to Jody and asks her to the prom. She rejects him. He then asks either of them if they would like to be Bill's date. They both reject the idea and walk away. Rather than be hurt and vengeful, Ted moves on, which really cements the fact that they don't care about how they look. I also love that he cares so much for Bill that he asks the girls about any interest in his friend, even after he's been rejected. And rejection is a huge part of life, especially when pursuing a dream. And the duo take it like champs. In a way, these pages have done an excellent job showing they have no future, but also showing that they do have the tools needed to succeed. Then we come to a huge line of dialogue. Bill stresses about an upcoming history review session. We've been getting subtle hints thus far about the major conflict that these two will have on the way to starting their band, but this starts to clarify it. History. The movie is about the present needing to save their future by studying the past. Then we come to another beat that isn't present in the final film. Ted remarks that school can't be starting yet because his watch shows that it's 5 a.m. Aside from further emphasizing time as a motif and an ever-present external conflict in the film, it also further establishes Ted's character. He's smart enough to know when to meet Bill at the bus stop, what bus to get on/off of, but he doesn't have the brain power to process that his watch is not the absolute authority on time. It's just good character continuity. This page begins with Bill berating Ted for not winding his watch. The tagline for this movie is, "History is about to be rewritten by two guys who can't spell." As ironic as that is, let's talk about the irony that is Ted's watch. Throughout the movie, Ted looks to his watch, but constantly misinterprets the amount of time they have left because he forgot to wind it up, causing it to stop working. Since the movie is about time travel, he and Bill can literally become Time Lords, and he can't even wind his watch. Also, it's worth noting that this beat about Ted's watch comes right after Bill starts to worry about history, symbolically foreshadowing their adventure through time. The script then cuts to the classroom, showing us a board of historical categories, with important figures listed under each period. It's interesting that Bill and Ted will collect figures from each one of these periods. The script also has them grab Julius Caesar as well as a serf named John from medieval England.
Bill, I'm waiting.
Another reference to Bill and Ted always being late. It's also interesting to note that teachers are expected to challenge their students and push them to be their best. This makes their teacher, revealed as Mr. Ryan, the focal antagonist. Not villain because he's not actively working against them, but he is a major obstacle that they need to overcome. He is described as serious, which is a perfect contrast to Bill and Ted. Bill describes a historical figure of being short and dead. We can pretty much surmise that he is talking about Napoleon, which Mr. Ryan confirms with a summation.
Napoleon was a short, dead dude.
It's interesting that the first figure that they're talking about in history is also the first one that the duo picks up on their adventure.
It's Napoleon. The short dead dude from our history review.
After the whole class laughs at Bill for his comment, Ted turns to his friend and mocks him. Man, that is the sign of being a best friend right there. But he immediately pays for it as Mr. Ryan overhears this and asks him to stand up. Ryan asks about Joan of Arc, another figure the duo eventually pick up. And Ted fares no better than Bill. This is the first instance of Bill and Ted against their primary obstacle, and both fail miserably. It is common for characters to fight the antagonist and lose before returning and winning. Usually this takes place closer to the second act turn or the all is lost moment. But here, it's in the first 10 pages. Bill and Ted will not come face to face with Ryan again until the end of the film, so it creates a nice bookend to the story. After class, Bill and Ted stand at Ryan's desk. They attempt to persuade him that they have learned a lot in his class. Roll for deception. Critical fail. He doesn't buy it. Instead, we get this important line, closing this Spec script's first 10 pages.
And what have you learned?
This line is the central conflict, fully established. Over the next couple of pages, Mr. Ryan will state that the pair are failing the class and require an A+ to pass. The stakes are set, and the pair have consequences to any failure that befalls them. The script for Bill and Ted's first film has plenty of instances of the Rule of Three, setting up the solemnity and importance of the future, then paying it off with the subversion of their laziness and immaturity. But it also does a great job establishing its characters, their goals, and the obstacles that they need to overcome. And for a silly comedy, it does this in surprisingly clever ways. By setting up the passion that our heroes have for their dreams, we can immediately empathize with them, allowing us to be sucked into the story more easily. That connection allows us to become more engaged with the movie, and therefore laugh when we need to, making it a great comedy. In short, this time travel movie seems to stand the test of time. So,
What have you learned?